I always thought I'd have more time. One day I was grading papers in my sunroom, sipping weak chamomile like always. And the next, the words, aggressive and advanced, fell from the doctor's mouth like they were nothing. I didn't hear much after that, just a low hum and the sterile smell of his office swallowing me whole. I remember thinking, this is it. This is how it starts. The slow disappearance. My body failing, my world shrinking. Sabrina moved in the very next week. She came bustling in like a whirlwind of color and noise, taking charge of everything, the house, the mail, the medications. She said it would be easier if she handled the bills, the insurance, all that messy adult paperwork. I didn't argue. My hands shook too much anyway, and I couldn't focus long enough to make sense of numbers. I was so tired, and honestly, I was just grateful she was there. Or at least I wanted to be. One night, she sat by my bed and held my hand. "Don't worry, Mom," she whispered. "I'll take care of everything." And I believed her. I really did. When she brought me the papers, I didn't even read them, just signed where she pointed, trusting her like only a mother can. Power of attorney, access to accounts, the deed to the house. She said it was all temporary, just until I got better. But no one thought I would. Not really. Not even me. She started changing things almost immediately. I could hear the hammering downstairs, see the swatches of paint on the hallway walls. Contractors came and went. She'd disappear for hours, come home with bags of new clothes, or talking about trips she'd booked just to decompress. I told myself it was how she was coping, that she was grieving, preemptively. I didn't realize she was already rewriting the story, one where I was gone, and she was the one left behind. The days blurred. I spent most of my time in bed, counting the creaks in the floorboards overhead and pretending not to hear Sabrina on the phone, laughing. Sometimes I'd catch bits and pieces, brunch plans, interior designers, some beach resort that sounded too expensive for either of us. When I asked, she'd brush me off with a quick smile and a soft, "Don't worry, Mom, just rest." So I did, or tried. But something in her voice had started to change, softer, but colder. One afternoon, I overheard her in the kitchen. "No, it's done. Everything's in my name now." Her tone was casual, like she was talking about dry cleaning. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My body was so frail then, I felt like a leaf on the verge of breaking. And still, I told myself I was imagining things. That this was grief making her distant. That she was protecting me from the ugliness of reality. I didn't want to believe anything else. But there were signs I couldn't ignore. My favorite armchair vanished. The garden I'd tended for decades was replaced with gravel and modern planters. The photos of your father, gone from the mantel. In their place, new frames, new faces, all perfectly curated for a life that no longer included me. She told the neighbors I was sleeping most days now, and started closing the door when visitors came by. I wasn't dying yet, but she was already grieving something, or pretending to. I'd stare at the ceiling for hours, listening to the hum of the new appliances, the unfamiliar music playing through her Bluetooth speakers. Sometimes I felt like a guest in my own home. Other times, I felt like a ghost. I don't know what hurt more, the way she changed everything so fast, or the fact that part of me still wanted to defend her, still whispered, "She's your daughter, she loves you." But there was another voice growing louder, buried deep in my chest. A quiet voice that asked, "What if she doesn't?" The first real moment of clarity came one morning when I caught my reflection in the mirror. Pale, sunken eyes, thinning hair, skin like paper. But the mind behind those eyes was starting to spark again. I could feel it. Something had shifted inside me. My body still ached, but my thoughts were sharp. I started asking small questions. Harmless things like, "What day is it?" or "Did the electric bill get paid?" Sabrina would smile too quickly, then vanish into another room. Every time. She stopped answering directly. Said things like, "Don't stress about that, Mom," or "I already handled it," with that same sugary tone that had once soothed me. Now it made my skin crawl. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Not yet. But I knew something was wrong. Not medical, not physical. Deeper than that. It was a hunch that settled like a stone in my gut. I began paying attention to her silences, to the stack of unopened mail, to the way she flinched when I asked about my pension. I waited until she left for one of her spa weekends. She said she needed time to recharge, as if caring for me had drained her spirit. I shuffled out of bed, every joint screaming in protest, and sat at the old computer in the study. Logging in was harder than I remembered. My hands shook so badly I had to type the password 3 times. But when the screen lit up, my breath caught in my throat. Empty. Every account. Savings, retirement, investments, gone. Not low, not mismanaged. Gone. Then I looked at the property records. My home, the house I had lived in for 42 years, where I raised my daughter, buried my husband, planted every rose in the garden. It wasn't mine anymore. Legally on paper, it belonged to her now. Sabrina, my baby girl, my caregiver, my thief. And in that moment, sitting in the cold blue light of the screen, I realized something chilling. I hadn't died, but something else had. It started with my appetite, just a little rumble in the middle of the night, after weeks of barely keeping down water and broth. I remember being almost afraid to mention it, like I might jinx it, but I whispered to myself in the dark, maybe, and then maybe turned into a spoonful of soup. Then 2. Within days, my legs felt a little steadier. The weight didn't come back overnight, but the fog in my mind began to lift. And with it, the quiet rage I hadn't known I'd buried. The doctors were stunned. I could see it in their eyes. They kept flipping through test results, asking questions twice, checking vitals like they didn't trust what they were seeing. "It's rare," one of them muttered, "but not impossible." They started using words like remission, stabilization, and functional recovery. I wanted to cry, but all I could do was sit there and nod. Part of me was grateful, truly. The other part? The other part was already thinking about what Sabrina had done while I was supposed to be dying. I expected her to be overjoyed. I imagined her bursting into my room with flowers, tears in her eyes, hugging me like she used to when she was small and scared of thunderstorms. But she didn't. She was off, detached. She smiled, that same tight, strained smile I'd grown to mistrust, and said all the right things. "That's amazing, Mom. And I knew you'd pull through." But her hands were restless, her eyes darted, and she stopped making real eye contact. Little things started piling up. She forgot appointments. She left early and came home late. She brushed off conversations about rehab plans or long-term care. When I mentioned money, even vaguely, she changed the subject or suddenly needed to answer a call. And slowly that pit in my stomach returned. Not the nausea this time. Something sharper, meaner. I didn't know it yet, but I was waking up, in every way. She stopped bringing me the mail, said it was all junk anyway. I asked once, just once, about the electric bill, and she laughed. "Still worried about bills?" she said, as if that was absurd. But it wasn't absurd to me. It was my house. My life. Or at least it had been. I started noticing she'd leave her laptop open sometimes, just for a second. I'd catch flashes of emails, credit card statements, shopping carts full of designer clothes. I pretended not to see. But I saw enough. One day, she left her phone unlocked on the counter while she was in the shower. I wasn't proud of what I did. Or maybe I was. I opened her banking app, just to look, and what I saw nearly made my knees give out. Transfers. Dozens of them. All from accounts that used to be mine. Everything. Every cent I'd saved, scraped, sacrificed for, had been funneled into her name. Her new life. Her future. The kind of future I wasn't supposed to be alive to witness. I didn't cry. I sat very still and put the phone back exactly how I'd found it. Then I went to my room, closed the door, and stared at the ceiling until it blurred. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a one-time error, or a miscommunication, or even desperation. It was planned. Quiet, methodical. She had done this to me with intention. And the silence. The lies. They weren't to spare my feelings. They were a cover. A mask she wore while she gutted the life I built. But the worst part wasn't the money. It wasn't the betrayal of trust. It was the realization that she never planned for me to come back. Not fully. maybe not at all. Every smile had been an exit strategy, every soft word a delay tactic. She wasn't distracted. She was waiting for the clock to run out. And now I'd broken the timeline. I wasn't supposed to be standing here, looking her in the eye. Alive, awake. A variable she didn't count on. I waited until she left for a quick errand. Something about needing a new lamp for the guest room, as if she were prepping the house for someone else. I pulled myself out of bed, heart pounding like a drum in my throat, and made my way to the study. Everything felt unfamiliar now. The furniture was rearranged. Family photos replaced with abstract prints in gold frames. My old desk was shoved into a corner like an afterthought. Still, my fingers knew where to go. Muscle memory, instinct. I logged into the online banking portal. At first, I thought it was a glitch. Zeros, every account. I refreshed the page 3 times, praying it was a connection issue. It wasn't. The joint accounts were closed. The savings I'd tucked away over decades of budgeting and canceled vacations, drained. I checked the house deed next. A deep chill ran down my spine as I saw it. Her name. Only her name. I had nothing left in my own name. Nothing but the clothes in the closet and my name on a few prescription bottles. It felt like drowning, not in water, but in disbelief. My hands were shaking, but I couldn't tell if it was from rage or heartbreak. Maybe both. I stood there gripping the edge of the desk until my knuckles went white, trying to understand how someone I raised, someone I once rocked to sleep, could hollow me out like this. I gave her everything, and she took more. Not out of need, but entitlement. As if I owed her my death. As if surviving had ruined her plans. I didn't call her that night. I didn't scream or cry or leave angry voicemails. I lay in bed awake until dawn, the screen glow still burning behind my eyes. She thought I'd never notice, that I'd slip away quietly, like a candle flickering out. But I wasn't flickering anymore. I was burning, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel afraid. I felt something sharp and alive rising inside me, the kind of feeling that doesn't go away, the kind that demands an answer. I didn't plan it. The confrontation just happened. 1 minute, we were sitting in the kitchen. She was scrolling through her phone, pretending to listen to me talk about the garden. The next, I said it. "Where's my money, Sabrina?" My voice didn't even shake. That surprised me. She froze, thumb hovering mid-scroll, looked up slowly, like I'd spoken in another language. I repeated it. Louder this time. "Where is everything? The accounts? The house? My life?" She didn't even try to deny it. That was the part that broke me in a way I wasn't ready for. No lies, no feigned confusion, just a flat voice and a shrug. "I took care of you. I handled everything while you were wasting away in that bed. I thought you were dying, Mom." She said it like it was a justification, like love could be itemized and repaid in deeds and signatures. You don't get to come back and pretend like none of that happened. My breath caught. My hands clenched around the edges of the table. "You deserve it?" I asked, the words coming out quieter than I expected. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't crying. I was just stunned. "I gave you access because I trusted you. I was vulnerable. I was sick." She rolled her eyes, rolled them, as if I were overreacting, as if she hadn't stolen years of sacrifice in a matter of weeks. That was when it hit me. She wasn't ashamed, not even a little. Whatever remorse I'd hoped to see in her eyes, it wasn't there. It's a strange thing, realizing your child doesn't feel sorry, that the same person you'd die for wouldn't hesitate to strip you clean if it suited her. I sat back, letting the weight of it settle into my bones. The silence between us stretched, brittle and heavy. She looked back down at her phone like the conversation was over. But it wasn't over, not even close. I wasn't weak anymore, and I sure as hell wasn't finished. That night, I couldn't sleep. My body lay still, but my mind raced, not in circles, but forward, relentlessly. I replayed every moment, every kindness I'd shown her, every time I said yes instead of no. I remembered her as a child, how she used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, her little hands gripping my nightgown. I held her then. I protected her from everything I could. And now, here she was, a grown woman who looked me in the face and decided I was expendable. Grief is strange. It didn't come all at once. It arrived in waves, first disbelief, then sorrow, then fury so sharp it made my teeth ache. I wanted to scream, to throw things, to rip down every piece of her new decor and remind her that none of it was hers. But I didn't. I held it in. Because rage without direction is just noise. And I didn't want noise. I wanted justice. Not a performance, not a confrontation that ended with slammed doors and silence. I wanted something real. Something lasting. The next morning, while she was out, I called an old friend, Anna, who used to work in real estate law before retiring to tend her roses and drink wine before noon. I need help, I said. I didn't explain everything at once, just enough for her voice to sharpen on the other end of the line. I know someone, she said, and just like that, the gears started turning. Quietly, carefully, no drama, no crying, just the beginning of a plan. Later that week, I met with a lawyer. Then a financial consultant. I could feel myself coming back to life with each step, like a fire being stoked under wet wood. My legs still ached. I still took naps in the afternoon. But the fog had lifted. I was thinking clearly now. And beneath all the ache and betrayal, something new had taken root. Purpose. Not revenge for revenge's sake. Something deeper. I didn't just want to take back what she stole. I wanted her to feel the weight of what she'd done. I started keeping a little notebook, just a cheap spiral one I hid between books on the shelf she never touched. Every phone call, every login, every time she slipped and mentioned something that didn't add up, I wrote it down. Not because I needed proof, I already knew the truth, but because I needed to remember I wasn't crazy. Gaslighting makes you question your own shadow, but I saw it all now, clearly. She didn't break me. She just gave me focus. I found old documents buried in a drawer she thought I'd forgotten. Deeds, insurance policies, bank statements. Some still had my signature, others didn't. And that's when it hit me. Some of these were forged. The handwriting was good, but not perfect. The curves too tight, the loops too rushed. She hadn't just manipulated me when I was vulnerable. She had committed crimes. Real ones. I sat there for a long time, just holding the paper, feeling something cold settle into my chest. This wasn't just betrayal. It was theft, identity, agency, dignity, all stripped from me while I lay half alive, clinging to memories of the child I thought she was. I had begged my body to hold on, to keep breathing, and now I finally understood why. I wasn't supposed to leave quietly. I wasn't supposed to die for her convenience. I was meant to wake up, to watch, to respond. Not with violence, not with tears, with action, sharp, legal, permanent. I didn't tell her I knew, not yet. I still smiled when she came in, asked how her day was, nodded politely when she rambled about her weekend plans. I let her believe I was still the frail, half-awake woman she thought she'd buried. But I wasn't. Not anymore. I was patient. I was precise. And while she celebrated what she thought was victory, I was building something much stronger, a reckoning. I became exactly what she needed me to be. Invisible. Soft-spoken. Grateful. I thanked her for dinner even when it was just leftovers. I complimented the new rug she bought with my money. I asked her to explain things slowly, like my mind was slipping again. She lapped it up. The more I played dumb, the more confident she became. She had no idea I was documenting everything. She didn't even notice the envelope tucked behind the laundry shelf, filled with copies of forged documents. Every day, I became more convincing. I shuffled when I walked. I paused mid-sentence. I stared out the window for long stretches, pretending to forget what season it was. She'd pat my hand and say, "It's okay, Mom. I've got it all under control." And I'd smile, because she was right, just not in the way she thought. My lawyer had already filed initial inquiries. The financial consultant traced every transfer. I wasn't just building a case, I was building a timeline, and a story. One she couldn't wiggle out of. I found a way into her email. One night, After she went to bed, I pulled up her laptop and searched for my name. Hundreds of messages popped up. Banks, realtors, private money managers. She was meticulous, but sloppy with her passwords. That arrogance again. She thought I was gone, a relic. But I wasn't gone. I was watching, reading, collecting. There were so many breadcrumbs, I didn't even have to dig. She left her trail wide open, like a woman dancing through a crime scene. Then came the real break. I found a message from a notary who had supposedly witnessed my signature on a transfer dated during a week I was hospitalized, unconscious. It was all there, the timestamp, the IP address, the mismatch in records. I printed it, highlighted it, added it to the growing file in the back of my closet. It was the first time I looked in the mirror and didn't see a victim. I saw a witness, a survivor, and maybe, if I played this just right, a reckoner. I started recording our conversations. Nothing obvious. Just a tiny mic, the kind you clip to a blouse, tucked beneath my collar. I'd ask innocent questions. Do you remember when we changed the deed? Or, which bank did we move the pension to? She'd answer without hesitation, confident I couldn't piece it together. But I was. Every word she spoke became another thread in the web she didn't realize she was spinning. I'd replay her voice at night, each casual confession another nail in the coffin she built for herself. My lawyer was impressed. "You're methodical," she said. "Most people wait too long to fight back." I told her it wasn't about revenge, not entirely. It was about dignity, about reclaiming what was mine, not just money or property, but truth, legacy. I didn't want to disappear under a false story. I wasn't a fragile old woman who handed over her life blindly. I was a mother who trusted too much, a widow who let love cloud her instinct. But not anymore. That version of me no longer lived here. Behind the curtain of politeness, I was relentless. I learned how to pull court records, how to read title transfers, how to trace wire movements across holding accounts. I spoke with a retired accountant who walked me through patterns of asset laundering. And the more I understood, the more I saw how bold she'd been. She wasn't desperate. She was greedy. And the legal system, slow as it was on my side now. Because what she'd done wasn't just immoral, it was illegal. She still thought she had me fooled, still smiled when she handed me my tea, still kissed my forehead like I was drifting toward the end. I played my part with care, quiet, sweet, fading. But every time she left the house, I made another copy, filed another note, circled another date. There's a power in silence when it's chosen, a strength in waiting, and I knew, when the moment came, I wouldn't need to raise my voice. The truth would do the screaming for me. I even let her throw a party. "Just a few friends," she said. "Something to lift the mood." I watched her pour wine into glasses I used to save for Christmas, her laughter echoing through the halls like she owned them. They toasted her, to her strength, her devotion. One woman actually said, "You're an angel for all you've done." I almost choked on my ginger ale. I smiled, of course, waved politely. No one looked at me long enough to notice the glint in my eyes. No one suspected I was the one writing the ending now. After the guests left and the house was quiet again, I opened the drawer in my bedside table and pulled out the folder. It was thick now, dozens of documents, statements, notarized letters, screenshots, timelines. The lawyer said we had enough, more than enough. "This is solid," she told me. "We can press charges, civil and criminal." I nodded, but I didn't rush, not yet. I wanted her to feel completely safe. I wanted her to let her guard all the way down. To believe, for just a moment longer, that she'd gotten away with it. She was careless by then, talking about trips she wanted to take, apartments she wanted to buy downtown. She spent her evenings with real estate agents and stylists, flipping through catalogs, planning a life with money she didn't earn. I encouraged it. "You deserve something nice," I'd say, my voice like honey. "After everything you've done for me." She'd beam with pride, not realizing I was softening the ground beneath her feet, letting her dig her own hole with every detail she revealed. I began rehearsing how it might play out, the day we served the papers, her face when she read the charges, the silence that would follow. And yet, something in me stayed still, quiet and waiting. Because sometimes justice doesn't look like shouting in courtrooms. Sometimes it looks like watching someone build a palace on quicksand and standing there, steady, as the ground begins to crack. It was supposed to be the week we filed. Everything was ready. The legal documents, the timeline, the official complaint. I even had the meeting scheduled with the courthouse clerk. I remember waking up that morning with this strange calm, like the kind you feel before a storm. Not afraid, just steady. I had waited so long to be heard, to reclaim what had been stolen. But then the phone rang. An unknown number, a voice I didn't recognize. "Are you Helena?" they asked. "You need to come home, right now." I thought maybe it was a break-in. Maybe she'd been robbed. I had no idea what I was walking into, but the moment I stepped through the front door, I knew something was wrong. The house was too quiet. No music, no phone calls, no television humming in the background. Just silence. And then I saw her. Collapsed on the floor near the kitchen, curled in on herself like a child. An empty orange pill bottle resting beside her hand. A note on the table folded neatly. My name written in her handwriting. My first instinct wasn't rage or triumph. It was panic. I dropped to my knees, felt her neck for a pulse. There was one, faint but there. Her skin was clammy, her breath shallow. I called for help without thinking. The words tumbled out of me like muscle memory. Address, symptoms, the kind of pills she might have taken. The paramedics arrived fast. One of them, a young man with kind eyes, looked at me and said, "It's good you found her when you did. She's going to make it." And all I could do was nod. Then I read the note. Just one line. "You were supposed to die. You were supposed to let me go." My throat closed. My hands trembled. It wasn't just confession. It was a farewell. Not just to me, but to whatever version of herself she could no longer live with. And I stood there, torn between two truths. The woman on the stretcher was my daughter, and the woman who wrote that note was a stranger. The hospital was cold. Not in temperature, but in atmosphere. All white walls and tired fluorescent lights, humming like a warning. I sat in the corner of her room while machines beeped softly around her. Sabrina looked small in that bed. Not powerful, not manipulative. Just pale and still, like the little girl she used to be when she had fevers and I'd sit by her side, wiping her forehead with a damp cloth. My chest ached with something I didn't have a name for. Anger, love, pity, all of it. None of it. The nurse came in to check vitals. She looked at me, hesitating. "Family?" she asked. I nodded. The word tasted wrong, but I said it anyway. Family. What a strange, brittle thing it had become. I watched Sabrina sleep, tubes snaking from her arms, face slack and unguarded. I wondered if, in that place between consciousness and nothingness, she felt regret. Or if she still believed I was the villain, the stubborn mother who refused to die on cue. I leaned in close, my voice barely a whisper. "You'll survive this," I said, not as a wish, but a statement, a truth she'd have to live with. "But I'm not coming back for you, not again." It wasn't vengeance, it wasn't spite, it was release. I had given her every chance, trusted her, loved her, forgiven her before I even knew the full depth of her betrayal. But this was the end of the story she wrote. And now, I was writing mine. I stood up slowly, my joints stiff from hours in the chair, and walked out without looking back. I didn't need to. She'd wake up. She'd live. And I hoped, in some deep, aching part of me, that she'd learn something. But whether she did or not, that wasn't my burden anymore. Mine was lighter now. And I carried it with quiet purpose, straight into the office where I signed the final papers that would unravel everything she stole. The courthouse smelled like old paper and resignation. I stood at the counter, pen in hand, as the clerk walked me through the last few signatures. It should have felt like victory, but it didn't. It felt like grief wearing a new coat. I wasn't getting my years back, my trust, my illusions, but I was reclaiming the truth. And in doing so, I was freeing myself from the weight of pretending. The pretending that she'd come around, that we were still mother and daughter in a way that meant anything. I finalized the lawsuit. Everything we'd built, the case, the evidence, The paper trail, all of it submitted. Civil and criminal proceedings. Full restitution. The lawyer asked if I wanted to keep the assets, the money, the house now returned to my name. I shook my head. No, I said. It's not mine anymore. It never will be. That part of my life had already died, and I wasn't going to carry its ashes. I had something else in mind, something no one expected. I set up the donation within the week. All of it. The recovered funds, the properties sold. Every cent went to a medical research foundation. Not anonymously. I made sure her name was attached to every donation. In honor of Sabrina Wells, the website would say. Let them wonder who she was. Let her legacy be tied to something that mattered, something bigger than greed or guilt. I didn't do it for her. I did it for the person I used to be, for the woman who still believed in purpose. And then I went home. Alone. The real kind of alone, not the version wrapped in lies and locked doors. I made myself tea, sat by the window, listened to the breeze rustle through the trees I planted decades ago. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. The shoes had dropped, the storm had passed, and what was left behind wasn't emptiness. It was silence, sacred, hard-earned, mine.